my name is Claudia Green, and this is She Did That, the podcast shining a spotlight on remarkable women who are breaking barriers and proving that greatness knows no gender. From female founders who have raised millions of pounds, the investors changing the landscape as we know it, to survivors of tragedy who have achieved the amazing and many more. We will share the stories of these incredible women who will inspire and empower you. In order to support us and these women, please subscribe on your viewing or listening channel of choice so we can continue our mission of sharing the stories that should and need to be heard. Today, I am joined by Chantal Cox, trained as a medical doctor, worked in emergency medicine, then became a VC investor, and is paving the way for women within the venture capital world. I am very, very, very pleased to introduce Chantal.
Thanks for having me. Really excited.
Me too. I would love to dive in with the same question that I ask everybody, which is early life, just to get a little bit of background and a picture of where everything started.
Yeah. So I was born in London, born in East London. I grew up in West London, and now I live in Southwest London.
Okay,
so
we've done all of London.
I've done all of it apart from North, and I tell my husband it's because we can't afford to live in North London yet. I'd love to live in Canonbury or somewhere.
Oh yeah,
Leafy or Hampstead Heath or something. But no, I'm a Londoner, born and bred. I went to university in Bristol, studied medicine and bioethics and law there. Loved the West Country, but ultimately London's where my heart is, so I came back. And I don't have any plans to go anywhere else, at least not for the foreseeable.
Well, let's see how the portfolio goes and you can get a second home there.
Maybe.
Goals.
Yeah.
So you studied medicine. Is that something that you always wanted to do from a young age? Like, when did you kind of get the moment where you thought, I'd really love to be a doctor?
I don't know if I had that moment, if I'm honest. I think I remember saying to my mum when I was a lot younger that I'd like to be a history teacher or a news reader.
Okay.
I still would love to do like TV, if I'm honest. Like, yeah. I just think
it's
incredible. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think like my mum was a midwife and health visitor in the NHS. And she came over here when she was young from Sierra Leone, and like for a lot of, I guess, the diaspora, like a lot of them chose to go into the NHS and or other sort of very solid, secure jobs. So I think I just remember medicine probably being my only option, weirdly, like from a very young age. And as soon as it was very clear that I could do sort of maths and science, it was like, you should be a doctor. And I sort of just went along with it. So I wouldn't say there was like an aha moment at all.
Was it something that your parents really wanted for you as well? Yeah,
I think like medicine, maybe not medicine, maybe the NHS is synonymous with like job security for a lot of people.
Good pensions.
Yeah, exactly. Strong and steady job. Solid income. Like I'd never be without an income. I'd always be sort of secure, and I think that was the most important thing. And I still maintain that was very much like the right decision in a world where, you know, for a lot of people who come to England, like they just don't know what opportunities are available, or didn't. I think that's different now, but didn't know what opportunities were available to them, and we're still navigating a system that otherwise like was still getting used to difference. And the NHS was very much a natural home for a ton of those people. So I definitely think it wasn't a bad shout, at least for the first chapter of my career.
So when you finished university, you studied, obviously, is it 7 or 8 years you studied for?
Oh, I did 6, but that was only because I did like a little degree in the middle. And then you come back. So when you start working as a doctor, you do 2 years, which are called your foundation years, where you ultimately go around different specialties and learn how to be a grown-up doctor. So I meandered through sort of plastic and reconstructive surgery, acute medicine, geriatrics, A&E, general practice, the works. And then at the end of those 2 years, you're effectively supposed to make a decision about what kind of doctor you want to be, i.e. what you want to specialize in. Yeah. And I thought I might want to be a GP, or I might want to do sexual and reproductive health. But ultimately wasn't sure. So decided to do a year of A&E just because it's fun and you learn a lot.
Is it fun?
It's fun in its own way.
I've been in A&E before. It didn't look fun.
I mean, you just see everything. So you become like very good at recognizing like sick, not sick, which sounds like a very binary thing.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of experience to get comfortable with like that person is fairly well, and the decisions you're effectively making are like, should this person go home? Should I send them to their GP? Does this person need treatment in A&E? Do they need to go and like be admitted into hospital? Like it's quite, and those things you become better and better at. Like you can flex that muscle a lot more when you see more patients. So A&E was like a really good training ground for that. Ultimately, it was like during that year where I realized that there was just so much more that I could be doing with my degree and with my skill set. And it was then that I decided to think about like leaving the NHS for what was the plan was for a bit.
And obviously we hear a lot about the intense environments of hospitals and burnout amongst all doctors, but particularly junior doctors. Real life, what was that like, having to deal with not only life or death situations, but in a state of complete exhaustion?
I remember just thinking I'm really young, like, but for myself and a ton of my peers, like we were like 24 when we graduated, 24 and thrown into the NHS on the first Wednesday of August is when all the new doctors start. And you walk in and all of a sudden you've got this doctor title and you've got your stethoscope round your neck and you've done all this studying, but you've never been responsible before for these patients. And for the first time, you genuinely are. Like when you sign, off a medication or treatment, like that was on you. And I remember just feeling this huge sense of responsibility at the time. And then I think there were definitely like moments in those first couple of years where I was like, oh my goodness, this job is wild. Like being maybe the only junior doctor on call overnight, going to see a sick patient who you knew nothing about, and you're having to very quickly get up to speed with what's going on, and then their family are also outside the door, being like, "What's going on? Keep us updated. Why hasn't this happened? Why hasn't that happened?" You're like, "I've never met your father, and I'm really sorry, but I'll do my absolute best. And as soon as I'm finished treating them, I'll sit down with you and discuss the next stages of their care." And just thinking like, this is an immense privilege, terrifying, anxiety inducing, but an immense privilege. And I'm grateful for it, but I do remember the anxiety. I definitely took it home with me. Like I'd get home and be like, I hope that person's okay. I'd hope those 10 people I saw overnight are okay.
Yeah.
And I'd be checking on them frantically the minute I got in for my next shift, like looking up on the system to check they were okay and that, that they'd been either discharged or got the right care, because it's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And one that all my friends who stayed in medicine, I'm like just so impressed by. Like, wow, it's such a humbling job as well.
I mean, it's a huge weight to carry, having to see a patient, make usually a very rapid decision that could be life or death, and then clock off essentially and hand it over to someone else. It must be like, they do say, I've heard a lot of people say doctors have to be quite desensitized.
Yeah.
But I've got a lot of doctors in my family. I've got friends who are doctors, and they're certainly not desensitized.
Yeah. I know people who are very good at it, but I wasn't one of them. I think it was that part of my personality that's probably made me first realize that maybe I wasn't going to be able to do this forever, like for my own mental health. Like I remember going for dinner with my husband, but he was then my boyfriend, and we were out for a curry after a shift, and I remember I was calling the hospital at dinner, checking on someone. Like I was so nervous about them and whether they were going to be okay that I don't think I spoke during that whole meal because I was just so stressed. Like I couldn't leave it at the door. And I think it's because what you do is just so important. Like the public ultimately trust you with their lives and with their loved ones, and no one in any of those NHS buildings takes that for granted. Like it's an incredible profession. It's just a lot. They
say it's a lot to be a doctor's partner.
I can only imagine
as well. Well, my brother is a doctor's partner, but she always says it's not for the faint-hearted, and a lot of people couldn't do it, and particularly being a female doctor's partner can sometimes, there shouldn't be a difference, but there might be a slight dynamic change because of the intense long hours and the responsibility you have. And that's not diminishing what your partner might do, but it's often been said that having a female doctor partner carries sort of that extra layer.
I've never heard that, but like I'm lucky that now husband, we've been together for so long that he saw me go through medical school. So I think the expectation had very much been set by the time I started working.
Yeah.
So I'd hope it hasn't been too traumatic for him. But
He's still here.
He's still standing. It's okay.
So did you kind of get a sense, because obviously you are massively you're saving lives. There's no other way you can help people more. But did you kind of have this sense that you weren't helping people at the true scale that you wanted to help people?
In a way, I think it was less that I wasn't helping people and more that I felt like maybe the system wasn't set up to be able to help them in the way that we could. And you often hear this term, right, that what we do is sick care, not healthcare. And you feel that particularly in A&E when you've seen people at their absolute worst when they're acutely unwell. But actually, I feel like we've learned so much about modern medicine and about the human body that we should be trying to solve more for preventative care. And I guess I just remember countless evenings, in majors and A&E and seeing the same type of what we'd often call in medicine, like a revolving door patient who would keep coming in with the same thing and everyone would roll their eyes and be like, oh, Bob's back. And you're like, yeah, but Bob's probably got a ton of other stuff going on in his life that means that he can't control his drinking, or, his COPD has flared up again, or that he thinks he has chest pain. And not all of those things are his fault. No. Some of these things are societal, and there are lots of social determinants of our health that mean that people present to us. But none of us had the time nor the resources to spend on him to help him from coming back in next Friday night, right? Like we just didn't. There were a lot of patients to see in a very short space of time with a finite amount of resource. And I guess I was getting frustrated by that because I was like, I'm not seeing this change. If anything, I'm concerned it's going to get worse. And I'm particularly concerned it's going to get worse for people who aren't wealthy and aren't the majority, right? And then there's a question of like, well, what can you do about it? And within the system, of course, there's stuff you can do, right? You can pick public health as a specialty and go and do that. Or you can become an A&E consultant and then, I don't know, try and change your department. But I just kind of felt like small little me wasn't going to be able to do much. And I was so inquisitive and so curious about how we could be fixing it. I just didn't think that was the position from which I was going to be able to drive that change. And so I felt like, okay, I'll leave for a bit and find out how problems are solved outside the NHS. Then I'll come back and save it. That was naive. So I left in like 2019, I think. And I just haven't looked back, weirdly.
Yeah. A lot of people often say a lot of doctors aren't business people. They're academic and they can be amazing doctors, but a lot of them aren't business minded. So it is quite a rare skill set to be able to go from working in A&E to then advising on a board and telling people how to, or how they should really be running their companies.
Yeah, and I struggle with that, right? Because I don't think I'm business minded, and I'm actually okay with that. I think that I'm fortunate in that I grew up in the NHS, so I understand how that system works, at least at service level. I can empathize with the patients or the patient experience when I'm looking at businesses. I've done a stint in strategy consulting, so like I understand things like profit and loss and like strategic growth and all of these sort of buzzwords. But I've never built a business, and I'm not shy about saying that. Like I've never been an operator. And maybe that's the biggest gap in my wheelhouse, right? Like I have so much time for people who build businesses. That is hard.
Yeah.
That is so hard. So all I am really is a cheerleader. That's how I see myself.
Oh, I think you're a bit more than a cheerleader.
I'm a cheerleader for healthcare companies, right? For the ones that we believe in, that we back. My job is to like guide, steer, ask the right questions, support when necessary, hold to account when necessary. But to tell people that they should do something about their business, that feels like overstepping the mark, if I'm honest, because I haven't been there, and I'm happy to admit that.
Yes, but I think you have to have a certain level of emotional intelligence to be able to come in from a high level, observe, and say, these are the parts of the business
that maybe aren't working as well or a little bit broken. And that's not just from, the actual model, is this viable in the health sector? It's also about, do you have a future with the way that you're running things? So I think you probably undersell yourself a little bit.
But it is easier to say that when you're not in the weeds. Like founders are in the weeds. They're doing everything, whether like one day it's trying to fix like one sales function, the next day it's like a recruitment issue, the next day they're trying to raise money. Like they're jack of all trades, almost master of none as founders at the beginning, because you're just scrappy, you're doing everything. It's very easy for me, who like has this helicopter view, sees everything, and I'm like, well, obviously you should be, or thinking about X, Y, or Z, and they're like, I just never have time to step back and look at that. And you're like, and I do. So that's a joy. That's kind of what I mean by like a cheerleader. Like I just step back and watch and cheer on, and hope that we've got a good enough relationship that some of what I say is taken on board.
Yeah, I like the term, and I think it's a really nice way of looking at things, particularly as sometimes, because I've worked with a lot of startups, and sometimes they do have investors who they feel are perhaps a bit over involved and are forcing their hand to make certain decisions, even though it's not really their place to force a decision. So I think it's refreshing to hear that, you're there to cheerlead, and it's this positive thing rather than I need to fix this and tell them what to do.
Yeah. It's interesting what you say there about forcing decisions. And I think that comes down to like this real, what's the word? There's a real power imbalance, particularly with VC, right? Where if as a founder you're not swatted up about what control of your business means, that actually there may be some pretty sneaky terms in there which mean that you can't actually make decisions without your lead investors, approval or say so, and you can't just go off and do whatever you want with the money that you've raised. So I think there is something around like maybe VCs owe it to founders to be far more transparent about exactly what control means in the terms that we're offering, so that they don't get taken aback by those kinds of conversations later on, and it seems like that they're overstepping their mark when actually they have very much a right to, and it's in the legal documents.
Yeah, I mean, again, another, I hear plenty of those horror stories where founders will come in and they think, okay, well, you're going to take 12% of my business, but at the moment it's 12% of nothing, so it's better than the alternative. But then actually when they realize, right, I need to raise Series A, and every other investor is saying, I'm not touching you with a barge pole because you've given away such a chunk in pre-seed to your pre-seed investors. So I do think, as with every sector, there are going to be the good guys and the bad guys. But I think it is important. I think when someone has a genuine passion to help those companies, and that intention is pure, and you're really passionate about it, then I think that's what makes the difference between, a decent investor or a bad investor and a great investor. Yeah,
I think that's fair.
And do you feel, this might be a difficult question to answer yet?
Go for it.
But since you've joined, so how many years have you been in VC now?
It's been about a year and a half, so it's not that long.
So you joined Octopus a year and a half ago, and you specifically work within health tech investments. Based on the last year and a half, do you see yourself either currently or in the future being able to make the impact that you'd hoped to?
Spotting winners in any industry is really, really hard. I think healthcare is quite unique in that, for good reason, it's highly regulated, and it's really hard to win the trust of your customer or your end, like your consumer, which is ultimately often a patient, but a human who has healthcare at their core. I do genuinely believe that there are a ton of incredible people building businesses that will really, really move the needle on people's health globally. Like, I really do. I think that there's a lot stacked against them because, particularly in the UK, for example, right, your main competitor is ultimately a free healthcare service. It's really hard to convince people then to self-pay for a service that they should or believe they have a right to otherwise receive for free. So that makes D2C really hard. Then when you look to B2B, like, employers are being chucked a ton of different healthcare solutions that they should be offering their employees, whether it's in the fertility space, whether it's menopause, whether it's childcare benefits, like all this other stuff. You've got pharma who, like, ultimately, big pharma wants to sell more drugs. So they're thinking about how this benefits them, how they can get more people through their trials. You've got, I mean, it's just hard to sell. And then you've got an NHS who does want to innovate, like does mean really, really well, but they don't have much resource to dedicate to innovation and technology. So they probably won't pay much for your product.
Yeah.
Plus, you don't sell to the top co event in the NHS. You sell to individual, like primary care networks, which are essentially like collections of general practices, right? Or integrated care systems, which are effectively hospital groups. Yeah. So you have to sell to like 140 different heads to sell your product. That's a mean feat.
Yeah, and sort of once you've had a no, it's quite hard to come back. It's maybe different in a lot of other industries, but yeah, having a no. And when you're, like for me, when I used to be in sales, I don't know if I should admit this, but I'd look at their address and I'd think, I'm going to call these ones first because I know they have tons of disposable money.
Smart.
And just shoot for those first. But when your entire potential clientele or your lead network are people with very, very, very shallow pockets, that's a lot to sell in. You really have to sell the benefits. Yeah. And it's not just going to be about, do you like this or not?
Exactly.
It's how's it going to actually help?
Exactly. And for like a lot of the B2B sort of clients, they really need to see what the return on the investment is going to be. And that's very hard to prove as a very small startup that hasn't had many people use your product yet.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult. I mean, for you, obviously you've gone from like an A&E hospital environment, done some, strategic consulting, and then gone into the VC world. What had you heard about the VC world, and what kind of made, like, how did you get into VC?
I did quite a lot of work on the lack of female entrepreneurs in the UK when I was still in strategy consulting. And I think I was just quite stunned. It hadn't been something I'd thought about much, but I just didn't realize that there weren't many women building businesses in the UK. And then when you drilled into why that was, it was like pretty clear there were 3 reasons, right? It was like, they don't get any funding. They take on the lion's share of caring responsibilities, whether it's for children or elderly parents. And they don't have the same network / mentorship that a lot of guys get. Like that was basically what it came down to. And I was sitting there and I was like, this is wild. Like less than 2% of VC funding is going to these people. But we know that when we invest in them, they drive outsized returns, that they like the amount of profitability generated. They were leaving so much money on the table by not investing in women. And then I was asking myself, like, I want to be part of that change, or telling myself I want to be part of that change, right? And it was either that like I went out and built something myself and tried to defy all of the stats that seemed to be against me, or I enabled it. And when you turn to look at the other side of the table, like the investors, there weren't many women there either. So I was like, well, it feels like the more, not straightforward, but the place I can have the most impact is by going to the investor side of the table, right? And actually eventually having check writing power so that I can genuinely invest in businesses that I think are truly brilliant, that are just being overlooked for whatever reason. I can't tell you why it is that women don't get as much investment as men. But I do believe that if there are more female check writers, that women will receive more investment. I believe that from the depths of my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really interesting. I was speaking to someone, met them for a coffee. I think it was a potential founder that I was going to work with. And he said he had 4 children. I said, oh, okay, wow, that must be a lot of work. And, what does your wife do? And he said, well, she stays at home with the kids. And I said, oh, great. And he said, but who wouldn't want to do that? And I said, me. And
amen to that.
And I said, what do you mean by that? And I don't think he had any ill will, but he said, okay, so a man approaches you and says, I'm going to go out and work up to 20 hours a day. I'm going to put food on the table. I'm going to give you a credit card. You can buy that perfume. You can buy that piece of clothing. And you're going to tell me that you still want to get up in the morning and leave the house and go to work. And I said, well, first of all, I wouldn't have 4 children. And second of all, yeah, there are a lot of women who do want to go and work. There are lots of women who want to be a full-time mother, and respect to them as well, because that is really hard work. In fact, I said, I think I'd rather go to work than have the responsibility and the work, the non-stop work of looking after children.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know a lot of women who wouldn't want that, and I just realised like, and this isn't, I don't think this is a common thing anymore, but it's fairly prevalent, the naivety that a woman would actually really want to go out there and be gritty. And when you picture a woman like that, you see the dreadful female contestants on The Apprentice, and who are like cutthroat and aggressive, and that's what a lot of people picture as a female founder, when really it's just the same as a male who has an idea, thinks it's viable, is extremely passionate about it, and wants to commercialize their model. So I think things are still a little bit skewed in that sense. But for you, obviously, there is a lack of diversity within the VC world. And first of all, a lack of diversity when it comes to women. If you think back just 5 years ago, if you counted how many women, let's say in the UK, were VC investors, it was low, really, really, really low. So you've come into an industry that is changing, but has not changed as a woman, but also as a woman of color. And, it's not hard to make the observation that there is a distinct lack of diversity in the actual women that are being hired as well. Is that a lot of pressure for you, or is it something that you find really exciting? Like, okay, so there aren't a lot of women, and there aren't a lot of women that look like me either that does this. I feel really proud. Or is it a bit of both?
I think it's probably a bit of both. And I get asked the pressure question a lot, but more from the perspective of, do you feel under pressure to back more Black female founders? Like, do you feel like you have to? No, I don't. The pressure I feel is that I have to be good at my job because there are so few of me. I don't want to give anyone the data point that Black women can't do this. So that's probably where the pressure comes from. But 9 times out of 10, like, for the majority of my week, I see it as my superpower to be the only in the room. I'm like, you sure as hell won't forget me if I'm good at my job and, I take a seat at the table. I don't sit at the back of the room or, and hide. Like, I always speak up. That, I believe that I have a ton of skills that are worth having on your team. And, I'll continue to work for teams who value that, right? Like, I believe that I'm a young ex-clinician with, strategic consulting skills. I've got a good problem-solving toolkit who happens to be in the investment world. And I have a decent, I hope, level of EQ. Like, I think that's the kind of person you want at your table. And yes, I might not see this, things exactly the same way as a ton of other people in the team. But what more beautiful thing is that than to have diversity of thought in the room? So, like, I very much see it as like a USP. I also, and I think lots of people from ethnic minority groups who work in any field, I feel an immense amount of responsibility to those who come after me. And I often take that for granted, and I get a cruel reminder after doing a podcast or like a panel, right? And a young Black female will come up to me and be like, Chantal, it's so lovely to meet you. Like, I heard you do this, or I really resonated when you said why. And I'm like, oh my gosh, people listen when I say stuff sometimes. And it's really important that I show others that, like, it's possible, because that's how I got here. If I couldn't have seen what was possible, I wouldn't have believed in myself to have got this far. And I've got a long way to go. I'm not even scratching the surface in terms of what I plan to achieve in my life. But, like, I wouldn't have got here without, the queens before me who, like, absolutely not just like smashed but shattered glass ceilings to show others that, like, Black women absolutely can be at the top of businesses. Like,
I mean, we know that,
right? Oprah, Michelle O. Like, we're around, but it's still novel. And I hope that by the time my children are my age, that I'm less of an anomaly. Like, I hope that's the case.
Yeah, because it's definitely an interesting one, because when I was speaking to another female founder, she said, I just didn't see very many people who were like me or who looked like me. So it never crossed my mind to be an entrepreneur, because it was like, well, that's not me.
Yeah.
That's not the type of person. So I think it is really important to be able to see different examples.
Exactly.
I mean, it's mental that we have to have this conversation full stop. And then it's like, right, what color, how many people, what color is their skin?
I know, it's crazy.
And you think to yourself, what difference does it actually make?
Yeah.
What skin color you are?
Yeah.
You come from an extremely impressive background with an impressive education.
Yeah.
Why are you having to prove yourself more than other people? Why are you holding this extra burden to prove to other people that they can do this when it's evident you worked hard just as much as everybody else who has a seat at that table?
Yeah.
So it's almost a bit infuriating when you really like delve into the subject.
It's infuriating, but like I often flip it on its head, and I also think like there's so much to be proud of.
Yeah.
You know, when I was coming into VC, I had the likes of, you know, Yvonne Bajella, June Angelides, Ella Wales-Bonner, like Chanel Answer. Like, there are women in this industry and we are doing bits, and it's exciting, right? And we also support each other and have each other's backs. I look forward to the day when I can go to any fund in the UK and maybe the US as well, and walk into their offices and see lots of people who look like me. But not only are they not in sort of left to non-investment roles, but also that they are at the top of these funds. I look forward to that day. But I think it's coming. Like, we've got energy and like a ton of grace. Like, I think we're getting there.
I think well, it's kind of there's a double side to it, because apart from the fact, okay, we're improving things on the female side, women of color, that's going at a pretty glacial rate. But then actually, let's think about the men, because I've worked with quite a few VC funds. I don't know too many men of color in those roles either. So it's almost like it's not just a female thing. This is like a people thing.
But I do think I think that the industry is aware of it, if I'm honest. And I think we've seen an element of change in the last couple of years. I think even just looking at sort of Czech Warner and Ada Ventures report yesterday about LPs and where money moves, just having reports like that come out about the lack of investment at LP level that's going into funds that are effectively homogenous, just being able to show the world the data that says that this isn't good enough will make a difference. It just takes a while for change to happen. Like, I hate the phrase Rome wasn't built in a day, but it's kind of true, right? So we are seeing some progress, but we've just got a long way to go.
Yeah, I do think that's the case, and it's, you know, it's something that there is a little bit of movement coming our way.
But we have to remind ourselves there is, because if not, founders aren't going to have any confidence in us either. Like, we have to do the work and we have to shout about the work, because we need diverse founders to keep building great businesses, because that's what drives true innovation in society. And if they don't see that reflected in the people who write the checks for them or invest in them, they'll lose the confidence, they'll lose the like gumption, the grit, and like that can't happen. Like, as a society, we just can't let that happen. No. So I feel like it's imperative that we just continue to like fight the good fight.
I feel like we need to put like that song, that Beyonce song, I Was Here on.
Yeah, I know.
I feel like it's suitable.
You know, Beyonce and I have the same birthday. It's like one of my things to tell everyone. I'm like, 4th of September, there were two queens born. It's me and B.
Well, she's proven you can do anything in the world
right?
as well, Queen Bee. So it's evident that the industry is changing.
Yeah.
How, and I know Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah.
But it did take quite a long time.
Yeah.
And it really shouldn't
Probably too long.
Yeah, it really shouldn't take that long for this to change.
Yeah.
Is there anything, aside from having female check writers, is there anything else you can see in terms of changing the landscape? And I don't just mean from an investor sense, but female founders as well. And I think whether it's female in general, or whether you look at women in color, when I spoke to you before the podcast, I said I'd gone to this conference, and I would say it was predominantly like 75% women of color. And it was like amazing networking and talks. And a lot of the founder talks we were having were from women from ethnic minorities. And I felt really embarrassed to say this and to think this. And I said this to a few people after. And I said, I thought there was just a lack of diverse female founders that exist.
Yeah.
But there wasn't.
Yeah.
There were hundreds of Asian, Black, all different walks of life who were founders.
Yep.
I'm not an investor,
but
their business ideas sounded pretty good to me.
Yeah.
And they literally were hitting a brick wall. Is there anything else that you feel like we can change to even support female entrepreneurship?
Loads. So I guess right at the beginning, I mentioned that, there are 3 big reasons why women typically aren't entrepreneurs at the moment, right? One is lack of funding, one is caregiving, one is mentorship and networks. On the funding front, like there is a world, I believe, in which LPs and others can demand that X% of their investment into funds goes to diverse founders. Like we can just mandate it.
Yeah.
I know it seems bullish and bolshy, but the data tells us that when you invest in diverse founders, you get better returns. Therefore, it's in LP's interest to demand that more money is dedicated to certain groups. I think the other thing is also being able to, I guess, educate founders about the fact that VC isn't your only route. Like there are other ways to raise money, be it crowdfunding, be it small bank loans, be it grants. Grants probably apply to the more sort of health tech, deep tech type businesses, which are very R&D heavy, but like research and development heavy. But just making sure that there's not so much of a power imbalance in terms of people just really do put VC money on such a pedestal, and it doesn't fit with every type of business. So I think there's like an education piece there. I think on the caregiving piece, I do wonder, like I've seen some amazing things from like, I know that Ada Ventures, I think they've partnered with one of their portfolio companies called Bubble, and they give all of their founders access to the Bubble app so that they have, emergency childcare support when they need it.
Wow.
Like that stuff really matters.
Yeah.
Building a business is a full-time job. Being a parent is a full-time job. Turns out you're going to need some help with some of these things. And investors putting their money where their mouth is and saying, we really believe in you. And yes, we might see the fact that you have a large family as a risk, an execution risk, but we'll do something to help you overcome that. That was a really big move from Ada. Like kudos to them. Like we love to see it. And then I think on the mentorship and networking piece, I think people tend to gravitate towards people who are like them, right? And if we have a homogenous VC population, they're going to gravitate to people who look like them naturally. We're probably going to have to push each other and encourage each other to do the work, to step outside of our comfort zones. Like 9 times out of 10, when I go to a founder event or a tech event, I'm the only or one of the only ethnic minorities in the room. So I'm often out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
So maybe it's okay for like, they always use this trope, pale, male and stale or whatever. But like, for the average white male investor to sit in rooms where they feel less comfortable. They'd be surprised what they might find. And don't get me wrong, there are lots of male VCs who are doing this today. I've sat in, Black History Month panel sessions with white cisgendered men and been like, kudos, well done for showing up. We love that. Like that can happen a lot more. It's just, okay, so people gravitate, and it's human nature. We always gravitate to what makes us comfortable and what we're used to. And, we're in the business of taking risk in VC, but ultimately we also look back and we say, oh, that person's done it 5 times before. So probably a safer bet than backing that person who's never started a business before. But really, like, innovation is found at like the peripheries, and that's why we have to be there to find it.
Yeah, and I suppose you can't really be put off by certain things, because I have a friend who's a founder, and she's not from the UK. She's part of an ethnic minority, and she said that she was given feedback that they couldn't understand her accent, which was totally untrue, because obviously, like, she's my mate, so we like, I know her well, and I've never ever struggled to understand a word she's saying. Yes. She clearly has an accent, but her English is 100% perfect. In fact, she started speaking English from the age of 3. And I said, did you genuinely get that feedback. And she said, I promise I was told that I wouldn't be maybe I shouldn't be the CEO of this company. It can be my idea, but maybe I should employ a different CEO because people need to really be able to understand you.
That's really disappointing.
Yeah, so it's, it's also the fact that there are loads of women who weren't born in this country, have come to this country.
Yeah.
They're going to have an accent and they should be proud of their accent as well.
Yeah.
But that's also a massive hindrance.
I mean, I'm so, that is really sobering to hear, if I'm honest. I think the one thing that founders should remember, though, is they do have a bit of power here. Like, founders talk to each other. We know there are tons of WhatsApp channels, right, with founders either praising or probably more likely like bitching about the treatment they've received from other VCs. I think that there's a lot of reputational risk involved with not treating founders well for VCs. And so I'd hope that that was an exception rather than the rule. I'm pretty appalled. There are also like random websites where you can like review VCs and stuff, right?
Oh, I want to go on those.
I've never been on them, like maybe because I'm scared. I don't know what people say about me.
No, you're good.
but I think there's reputational risk, and that really surprises me. And I'm sorry that she went through that because it's just not okay.
No, and I actually have spoken to a couple of founders who you have invested in as well. And don't be nervous, it was all good.
Yeah.
And one of them said that she was petrified because they were just about to raise their Series A. In fact, you'll see this in an earlier episode. She was petrified on the cusp of raising Series A with Octopus, and she'd not, it was time to disclose that she was not just pregnant, but really on the way to the delivery room. And she said that the way you handled it was so amazing. You said, no problem, log in on Zoom. If, I get it, you're heavily pregnant, you can't make it, it's not going to hinder your chances, which is an incredible thing to hear. And I think it shows more about how we do facilitate female founders. Because if you can facilitate a Zoom, why not make it easy? If they couldn't get childcare that day, they can still do their work. They might have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, or you can still Zoom in. And I think it's about facilitating those women. So it's not really a question, it's almost a kudos to you. The fact that you are making change, and hopefully you will be able to do that on a wider scale. The more female founders you back, and male founders, because there are a lot of male primary childcarers as well. But I think it's those things that are going to make a massive, massive change. And it's true what a lot of people say. You really have to pick the right investor for you. And it is like choosing a relationship. And you can't just take money because somebody's offering it to you. Yeah. And that was kind of their turning point, where they were like, oh, this is 100% our investor. This is the person we want on our, on our table and batting for our team. That's very kind. I think things like those are really important.
Yeah, and I hope I'm not the only person who would react that way. And I think it comes from a place of like, I've not had children yet, right? I hope to one day. But I kind of believe that I'll probably become even better at organizing life and like just getting stuff done when I've also got like a kid to figure out. It's hard enough getting myself like dressed and into the office on time. If I then have another person I'm responsible for, I'll probably become even better at my job. That's kind of my ingoing hypothesis, right? So for me, any female or anyone, to be honest, but like particularly a primary caregiver, either on their way to that or already has who already has kids, who is able to like show up, like build a business, build a deck, put together a data room, like sell, all of that stuff. I mean, you've pretty much, for me, mitigated any execution risk I had for you. Like, you've already shown me you can do it. Yeah. So I don't see it as a negative. If anything, I see it as a positive. But I think that's where like maybe as VCs we can do better, and how we think about risk when it comes to female founders. Like it's turning it on its head. It's like, what makes them more special because of this versus why is this something that we shy away from? Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to end on one final question. 5 to 10 years time. The dream. Apart from being Beyonce.
Oprah.
Okay, Oprah. No, I want to be the Oprah.
Okay, then I'll take Michelle Obama.
Okay, fine.
But I never want to be like a first lady. I want to be the president.
Okay.
5 to 10 years. That's so difficult. I don't really think past 3, but it's probably that I can be really proud of the portfolio that I've built. That my personal investment portfolio looks, and like me, it reflects my values, it reflects society, and where I genuinely believe that every single one of those investments will go far to like improving access and quality of healthcare. But also that I did so massively authentically and like completely live my values. So I just treating founders as I treat my friends, which some would argue is overfamiliar and not the way to do it. But I kind of think that if you're going to put the money in, you should trust these people to build their businesses.
Absolutely.
And then to just help them steer and cheerlead them. I know you don't like it, but cheerlead them along the way.
Yeah.
But then, I'll be 40 plus by then. So who knows? Maybe that'll change. I don't know.
Well, I've no doubt you're going to be a huge success. And I'm glad that you're making massive changes within an industry that desperately needs it. And I cannot wait to see what's next.
Let's see.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.